Hello, my name is Mordred Viking, and I'd like to welcome you to this special summary episode of the Clash of the Titans Europa Universalis 4 game that I have going with Great Britain, France, and Spain. Because the series has come to a pause for the time being, because unfortunately we didn't get as much of it recorded as I would perhaps have liked, so we had to have a roughly a week break or thereabouts before we were able to start recording again. So I wanted to make sure that you guys had something to watch in the week to break it up a little bit. And also I thought it'd be kind of cool to just have a look around. We have been playing for roughly 100 years. Is that right? No, 200 years. And, the world has changed somewhat since then. So this should give us a bit of an opportunity to drill a little bit more deeply into how things are looking everywhere and, just get a little bit more information. So I am, of course, playing as France. We're just here in the load screen right now, so I can click on the various countries and check out the ideas, the total development, things like that. So France right now, 2020 and all of the technologies. We have 73 provinces and a development size of 967 with 37 forts. Really, 37? Does that count the colonial nations, I wonder? Possibly. So Great Britain in comparison has 68 provinces. It's a little bit smaller, however it does have rather less development, more than 100. No, just under 100 even. I can't maths. And just a few less forts. Much of that I kind of suspect coming out of Denmark and their holdings here in the North Sea region. I do kind of wonder what I can do about removing those from the continent. Great Britain shouldn't be on the continent, has no interest in Europe. We're all about Brexit here. We're not really. I'm actually very pro-Brexit. But anyway, sorry, not pro-Brexit. I'm pro-Britain staying in Europe, but not this close to Europe. This is a little bit too close to Europe for my liking. Um, So what are Britain doing? Well, Britain do have a lot of colonies. They have Great Canada over here, the 13 colonies, British Louisiana and British Mexico. And of course, that is causing a couple of conflicts between British Mexico and French Mexico here, with French Mexico being somewhat larger. We also have the French Antilles, which kicked most of the Brits out. They do still have a holding here in Curacao and in the Bahamas. There was a war fairly recently between French Antilles and the British West Indies, and they did lose, I think, an island or two, but it wasn't as decisive as when the Antilles kicked them out of Haiti here and out of Guantanamo on Cuba. So we do definitely have a rather stronger grip here in Central America. The British don't have anything in South America. We've started trying to get a bit of Colombia. There is still a fair amount of stuff to colonize. Yeah, all of this is colonizable. We just haven't uncovered it yet. I think this is all still unexplored. I hadn't quite realized just how much space there was. Is this showing everything? Yeah. So this is now actually explored. So I should be able to see it. One thing I would kind of like to see is the colonial map mode, but I can't get it here because I want this little bit here to grow. You'll notice it has not joined French Colombia because I was trying to grow out French Peru. However, I accidentally gave this one province to French Colombia when we were fighting that war. And that one province, 1, 2, 3, 4, no, we would need one more, is causing a problem because I think all of this stuff is Colombia. Oh yeah, that was it. I had meant to take that one and that one, but because I'd given this one to Colombia, I wouldn't have the connection, so I didn't think it would form the colonial nation. So unfortunately, Portugal grabbed it, and I really screwed up there because 5 provinces would have been enough for the colonial nation, which would then allow me to fabricate some claims against Portuguese Peru down here and start attacking that. I'm still tempted to do that. I want a colonial war, and actually it would be possible to declare a colonial war, which would not then drag in the Portuguese allies. Actually, that is very possible. I could still do that. I might need to, because I still want to grow French Peru down here. I want more colonies, so I get more merchants, so I can start countering some of the British grip on trade, because Spain hasn't done very much of that, unfortunately. And yeah, I really need to cripple the British hold on trade. Oh, we're actually going to have to load the game to check that. Okay, so we'll continue talking about trade and colonies in a moment. We'll look at Spain here. They are by far the largest of the three of us right now. Britain and I have been having a lot of confrontations between each other, and we've kind of allowed Spain to grow a bit. Yes, we did have this little fracas earlier on, and France did actually win that one, though we did only take the one province, which I think was Urgel. Yeah, I'm fairly sure it's just the one province. So, yeah, we might have let them grow a little bit too much because they have now got 113 provinces, although that does include a fair amount here in North Africa and Italy. 1,249 development. Now, that is the problem because they are quite significantly bigger than us. And that is due to Italy. I'm not sure how much I can do about their Italian holdings. I kind of suspect Britain can do a bit more, but Britain did just lose that naval war against France, so the British fleet is suffering a bit. So, yeah, our constant rivalries are benefiting Spain more than benefiting either of us from our minor victories that we earn there. So we're going to have to do something about Spain in the future, I think. I'm just not entirely sure what at this point because they do have some fairly strong allies. The Ottomans, Augsburg, Austria, Portugal, and the Papal. Actually, the allies aren't that strong, except for Portugal and the Ottomans. We share the Ottomans as an ally. I thought the Ottomans are fairly weak right now, as they have a lot of debts from the various wars that they have been in. And Austria, so frustratingly, didn't get swallowed up by Venice. Venice had the opportunity to basically take Austria out. They completely screwed that one. Lost the war eventually, a war in which Austria was completely occupied, I hasten to add, and eventually got completely and utterly demolished themselves. In fact, they lost a bunch of territory up here to the Papal States, which I hadn't quite noticed. In the near future, I would quite like to consolidate my holdings over Savoy. We did manage to break the alliance between Spain and Savoy, which allowed us to attack it. But really, the Spanish are getting a lot of strength here in Italy, and I don't like that. That is very threatening to me. Yes, we basically have two borders now, and I don't like that. As much as I would like to kick France out of Europe, this is a bigger problem. And I think this is actually a problem for both of us, because the more land that Spain owns here in Italy, the more coastline they have, the bigger the fleet they can have. And then they become a serious threat to Great Britain, which until now has been feeling fairly isolated. And I think their defeat at the hands of the French will kind of wake them up to actually, we need to do something here. I mean, if they're losing to France and Spain is even bigger than I am, that's a problem for Britain. Bussie, I hope you're listening. Um, Alright, so let's start the game. I'm not going to load as these guys because I don't want to see where their armies are and stuff like that. That would just be cheating. I'm sure if they wanted to see where the French stuff are, they just need to watch my videos until now. So keeping secrets is rather more difficult for me, unfortunately. But I thought it would be interesting and important to talk to you guys about what is happening here. So my holdings here in Holland, I'm actually really happy with that. We are removing some of the trade power that Britain has, almost 25%, and as Holland continues to grow, I'm going to continue feeding them these northern provinces. In fact, I could actually feed them Artois, Picardy, Caux, and Normandy, which make Holland even stronger, especially as Caux is a estuary. Should I do that, I wonder? And Holland is a march, so Holland is going to have a fairly significant army and fleet of its own. Of course, they will have problems with Liberty Desire, although that's not really a problem. It's reduced because they're a march, so they are more loyal. Liberty Desire as a whole hasn't been too much of a problem for us, is it, for any of our allies? Sorry, our allies. These guys are not our allies. That was a bit of a screw up. So their Liberty Desire is 3.5. These guys are probably more 17. Louisiana, 0. Mexico, 2.1. Brazil, only 1. Oh dear. Rio de la Plata, 47. Peru, 45. So yeah, Portugal's going to have problems. And in fact, if we can force a war of independence between Portugal and its colonies, then we could seize upon these colonies ourselves once they're independent, because they won't be allied with the big boys, thankfully. What else has been happening? Britain's obviously trying to take over control of the North Atlantic, and they're trying to take Scandinavia because it is also rather navally strong. You'd have to come through Russia essentially to attack, although Russia itself is rather weak, so you would have to get some really fragmented military access to get to it. Excuse me. So Britain is playing a fairly smart move here in taking over Scandinavia. In fact, when I play as Sweden or Norway, I very often go for Great Britain myself because your fleets can protect you. Little less so in Denmark here, but Denmark's just so powerful because... Oh no, it controls Lubeck, not English Channel, of course. Oh, they're trying to push money out of Lubeck into the English Channel. In fact, there's a large chunk of money coming from here. I really need to start pirating this stuff. I just need more navies. I mean, yes, I've been building my navy up, but it's mostly heavies at this point, so that I can win some of the naval wars. Who were we talking about? Spain. Spain is who we were talking about because they are working on Brazil. In fact, I just noticed there is another... Is that another colony? No, it's not. It's just going to join in to Brazil. Who's this? That's just natives. So Brazil is probably going to be working fairly unopposed here unless the Antilles spread downwards, in which case we would then have a Antilles-Brazil opposition. And the Antilles are almost certainly stronger than Brazil, simply because they've been around for a lot longer. And Colombia's probably going to be the weakest of our colonial nations, honestly. I can see French Mexico being very, very strong, particularly because they are now struggling against British Mexico. If they are able to consolidate a corridor through here, that is, I think, their main ambition, is they can connect these two areas, then they would be a lot stronger for it. French Mexico has grown rather quickly, so it is a little bit unstable, hence we are positioning armies here. Our armies are basically dealing with the instability while the French Mexican army goes and fights the British Mexican army. Whether that will escalate, I don't know. It might, but considering how weak Britain is right now, I doubt that they will want to step in. At least that's my hope. Is Portugal actually allied? They're with allies with Britain and Spain. Yeah, I don't want to go to war with Portugal itself because they could bring in Britain and Spain. But if that was a colonial war which doesn't have allies, then that has potential there, so I need to think about that. I've been mostly thinking about colonial wars against the British colonies up here without really thinking about what I could do here in South America. Because in fact, if I can push French Peru far enough down, then I could start cutting off Brazil and hitting them from both sides potentially, because I reckon my colonial efforts down here will be a lot stronger than those of Spain. The other area of colonial interest is, of course, here in Western Africa. We have large parts of the coastline here, which is very, very important for the control of the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast is hugely important in much the same way that the Caribbean is, because it decides where trade flows. And basically all trade coming in from India is then divided at the Ivory Coast, which is why I wanted to seize this territory when I did. And I will probably continue to expand my interests here in Western Africa. I'm actually kind of hoping that Portugal grabs the Grain Coast, so it's just me and Portugal here, so that it does not give Spain and Britain a handhold. But right now we are pushing out 4.3 ducats. Spain, Portugal pushing out 7.9. Why is there so much higher? I would have thought mine would be higher. Yeah, it is. Oh, it's just because there's both of them doing it. They don't... Oh no, Portugal has ships, but... Or is that just a merchant? Nope, they have one light ship protecting trade there. So if I decided to shift my fleet over to here, I could push a lot of money directly into Bordeaux. And then Bordeaux basically is a French monopoly shoving money into Champagne. And actually this is where a bit of a problem is. Champagne is pushing money into the English Channel. I thought I would have more of a control here, but because of all the British trade ideas, they're able to push a lot of money out as well because of their control over caravans. So I will probably be forced to take trade ideas in the future. Yeah, I'm due either an admin or a Diplo tech. And I know I've been ahead of time in Diplo, so I was thinking of one of these two ideas. Honestly, I wanted this one because I want to continue to counter Britain, but I need to stop their money. I need the money for myself. Like everything that I take away from Britain, I get. And they don't. I also need to do that to Spain. I think that trade is where Spain is weakest right now. Yes, they're going to have a lot of production. Yes, they're going to have a lot of tax, but they don't have much trade infrastructure, which both me and Britain do. And I think that is going to hurt Spain in the long term. You can become hugely powerful through trade, as both Bussie and I know from our trade wars games, from our games as Venice and Genoa in the past before trade wars, and just generally my love of trade, and he's Dutch, so you know, trade. It's literally in our blood. What's the other thing? I've been taking over the Cape, not so much for its trade strength. You don't need to control much here because there's no natives. Like 1 or 2 colonies is quite frankly enough, and basically all the trade will be pushed forwards anyway. So it's not that important, and that's why I'm not really investing too much more into this area. More important will be the Gulf of Aden here, which is always something of a competition, because this is where you decide whether it goes through the Mediterranean, which would benefit Spain. I didn't even realise I was applying pressure there. Huh, interesting. Or you can push it around Africa, which generally benefits the Europeans more, starves the Ottomans from money, and the other Middle Eastern nations. And that's actually considered one of the reasons that the Ottoman Empire fell, was because trade started being pushed away from the Middle East, going around Africa instead, and basically cutting them out of a very large part of the trade pie. We have more or less skipped India entirely. It's a little bit too united for my liking, although it's Golconda. We do have Vinad here, which is very, very small, so that could be a potential stepping off point. And Vijayanagar here in Sri Lanka could be another potential opening, but while there is large openings over here, I'd rather just colonize Indonesia. So we're going to grab as much of Indonesia as we can, possibly Australia, and shift money west, either through the Middle East or through the Cape. Like I said, probably the Cape, so we can make use of our, hopefully, domination of the Ivory Coast trade node at that point, and then we can shift money into Bordeaux. Then, because of our trade ideas, we don't lose it from Bordeaux going north, it goes south instead. That's the plan. I do expect there to be more competition here in the Mediterranean in the future. I kind of expect Izual to shift his trade interests to Genoa, and to that end he does control two centres of trade, to our estuarian centre of trade, and no, in fact he's going to have a lot of control here of Genoa. So that's going to be causing some very, very significant tensions between us if he does do that. In fact, I would almost certainly be turning my eyes rather more strongly towards Italy than I have until now. France, as you know from the defeats that we suffered at the hands of Spain, and then later on, especially against Britain, when they were that one tech ahead of us and completely ruffle stomped us, quite frankly. We were a little bit weak and rather vulnerable, so we've been very much flying under the radar, but I feel like we're reaching the stage where we can start punching again. And I kind of think that both of these guys are a little afraid of that, especially Britain, considering the bloody nose I just gave them. Spain, to a lesser extent, Spain's playing rather isolationist and trying to stay out of our affairs, which is probably good for them because they're just going to be building up and building up and building up and building up. And then they'll suddenly emerge and probably take half of France in one gulp, which is why I really need conflict between Spain and Britain. But Spain is being very careful not to enter into Britain's sphere of influence, which is obviously here in North America. I've been a little less worried about that. I'm confident with the strength of my colonies here, especially the Antilles, to kind of spread my sphere of influence, and I definitely want French Mexico to win their war against British Mexico. I have been doing a few things to assist them there. I don't want to say too much in case Bussie is watching this, but yes, I have been doing what I can to help them. What else is there to talk about? Not too much. I reckon in the future, what do I think is going to happen in the future? That's actually a fairly good question. Spain is going to continue grabbing as much of Italy as they can. I think there's going to be an interesting conflict between them and the Papal States, especially as Spain is Catholic. And potentially with Austria, if they do go toward the Papal States, they go into northern Italy here, then Austria might jump in against them. I don't know. Saxony, my ally, has been doing quite strongly here in Central Europe, and in fact, oh no, Austria's getting the electors again. For a while, it looked like they were very much in danger of losing their electors, but they seem to have gained them back again. Unfortunately, it would have been very nice if Austria was no longer emperor. That would have made them a lot weaker, and we would have the ability to kind of jump on them, but that opportunity seems to have passed. Spain will almost certainly try and expand here into Tlemcen, possibly over into the Middle East. I know he loves playing as the Ottomans, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we start seeing some Spanish movement into Turkey and the Balkans and Greece. Just because I know he likes that area. And if he does that, then again, that would be causing trade conflict between me and him, because he would potentially be shifting trade away from the Gulf of Aden, which I would then be trying to shift south, and he'd be shifting north, well, northwest. So yeah, that's a potential problem. Britain, if Britain continues their movement here into the continent, that's going to upset me. Less so in Scandinavia, though I really don't want to give him the jumping off bridge there. If he continues moving into the Netherlands and possibly northern Germany, then that's going to be problems for us. We do have a border here now, so I could well try and strip him of these territories at some point in the future. I definitely have the stronger army now, so long as we keep on technological parity. I'm a little bit concerned about Spain's military dominance right now, just because they can field so many troops. If we look here at the difference in total, Spain 120,000 essentially to France's 76,000, although I can raise more than, yeah, I can reach almost 100,000. So I should probably grab another regiment. Sorry, not another stack, not literally a regiment. That wouldn't help too much. And then naval. This is actually kind of surprising because right now I've actually got the most heavies. Yes, Britain's been rebuilding them rather quickly, but we both swamp Spain. So Spain is weak at sea, and that is something that we need to make use of. Like maybe a landing here in North Africa to strip him of some of his territories here. Possibly an attack on Brazil. I don't know. That's a little more difficult because basically if I go to war with Spain, then Britain will go to war with me. If I go to war with Britain, then Spain has the potential to go to war with me. So I need to time any wars that I fight rather more carefully. Or these two, their conflicts, less so. Although because the three of us are so close, there is always going to be this clash, hence the Clash of the Titans. These were definitely the big three of Western Europe in this era. Although Spain is technically considered Southern Europe now, but at the time it was definitely on par with France and Britain. I mean, yes, you had some other powers over here in the east, but yeah, it was these three that were really fighting over the continent, and you have all the colonial pressures. And Africa, they were the colonial powers, the powerhouses, and Portugal and the Netherlands to a somewhat lesser extent, and then later on Italy. Britain certainly looks like it's going to have more or less a monopoly over northern United States, although depending on how far north French Mexico can push, this region is actually massive. So colonial Mexico could actually be a really, really strong power for us. And this is one of the reasons I've been pushing colonial Mexico so hard and going after the Aztecs and stuff here in the center, is to give them the resources to do that, so that they could be a major power block to British interests up here. And basically if Britain tried anything against me, then they would have French Mexico kind of staring at them in the back, which would be kind of nice. And then the Antilles, with their naval superiority, thanks to being an island nation, archipelago nation, would hopefully be able to threaten any naval stuff here, so that my own navy could pressure that of Britain, and then my colonies could screw them up. That's kind of my strategic level thinking there. I don't really have quite so much of a pressure point to push on Spain, and this is again one of the reasons I'm worried more about Spain than Britain right now. We have let Spain grow unchecked for too long, and that needs to change. Although I'm still not entirely sure how. I really want Britain and Spain to go to war. This would be the best release of that pressure. If I could sign like a non-aggression with both of them saying, if you two go to war, I'm not going to get involved, that might help things. I don't know, maybe that's something I should offer them. But yeah, that is where we're kind of looking right now. Another area which will be, I'm sure, growing into a theatre in the future will be India and possibly China. I will be the best positioned because of my stop off here in the Cape. I have got Diego Garcia here as another stopping off point, and of course I will have probably more holdings than them in Indonesia, so all three of these areas could jump off, although none of them are nations of their own right, so I would have to control them myself. And that is one of the problems I've been having, is because the French Empire is so disparate right now. We have American holdings, we have continental European holdings, we have Western and Southern African holdings, and Indonesian. We are literally all over the place. So sometimes things can get a little bit overwhelming, and that is a problem for us. And that is why I'd kind of like to make some of these areas autonomous, and why I would like trade companies to be autonomous, for example. That would be very, very helpful. Maybe I'll do that through client states in the future, but then I think I lose them as trade nations, sorry, trade charters. So I would lose the merchants that they would then be gifting me, which is bad, because like I've been saying before, I need those merchants to counter British trade interests. But yes, India is definitely a possibility. China is definitely a possibility, as long as we can find an area of opportunity, basically. So I think that is it for this summary. I hope you have found it of interest. I've been talking a little more strategically than I perhaps would in person against them. If they choose to watch this stream, then fine, I may ask them not to, just because we are talking like in so much strategy. But then again, I've also been talking about where I think their pressure points are, and that might well be of interest to the other player. I don't know. There's not in Canada yet. That was another sneaky idea I had, was to like get into northern Canada here to apply even more pressure from the north. But again, this is all focusing on Britain. Britain and I are stable, I think. Like, we both have our spheres of influence. Yes, there's some overlap down here, but I don't think we have that many issues right now. But Spain's a problem. Spain's definitely a problem. Anyway, I do hope that you've enjoyed this summary. If you have, then please do consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you haven't done so already. Likewise, if you have any comments for any of us, then please do let us know in the section below. Very much enjoyed talking to you guys there, so please do keep those coming. If you have any tips or advice for any of us, or if you're asking any questions about our strategies or anything, then please do ask them. I'm sure that we'll be more than happy to ask, although we might be a little bit mysterious in our answers, just because obviously this is a fairly competitive multiplayer game. When will the next episode be? That is probably a question on many of your minds. Probably, looking at my schedule here, I'm probably going to aim for the 24th of June to drop the next episode. I would hope. That should give us some time to record and to render it. So yeah, probably the 24th of June or thereabouts. Yeah, I think that's when we're going to aim for. I'll need to speak to the others because we haven't actually arranged a recording session, but I think we should all be available around that time. So I hope you'll join us then. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.